Hi everyone, today I'm going to be doing kind of a reaction video to The Great Hunt. This is going to be spoiler free. I'm not really calling it a review because honestly, I do not feel qualified to be reviewing The Wheel of Time one way or another. I'm really just trying to chronicle my experience reading through this series because it's a series that has meant a lot to a lot of people. So in this video, I'll be sharing some thoughts, some reactions. It'll all be spoiler free. So it's kind of a review. It's not that different than my other reviews, but it'll probably focus more on me and my personal experience and, less on some of the things that I might usually talk about in a review. Also, while I was reading this book, I did my best to film kind of a spoiler reaction vlog. It's my first time ever doing something like that, so I'm going to try to edit it and get it up in the next few days after I post this video. But, hopefully it went well. I haven't really looked at most of the footage yet, so we'll see what that's like. Hopefully, if you're interested in seeing even more about my Wheel of Time reading journey, you can check out that vlog in a few days. So if you watched my Eye of the World reaction video, you saw that I overall liked it, especially the world building, but that I complained a lot about the pacing and that I just felt like the characters weren't that well defined. There wasn't that much of a plot. It was kind of slow, but even so, it was still there was still something about it that made me really want to keep reading, and the world building really was great, and it really was quite epic, and I did feel kind of immersed in it. So in a little bit, I'll talk about how I feel now that I've read The Great Hunt, but just, to summarize, I will say I do feel like the pacing and a lot of things were way better in book 2. I am still not totally in love with The Wheel of Time, but somehow I just feel very compelled by it anyway. Like, it really does make me want to keep reading the series, even though I don't think it's perfect. It's not my favorite, but it still is kind of sucking me in its own way. So it's just kind of interesting to observe that. When I was talking about Eye of the World, I also talked a lot about my memories from when I first read the book, which was when I was about 8 or 9 years old. And so this is, I think, the last book that I actually remember reading in the series, so I guess I can still talk about the same thing. It's really funny to me seeing what I remember and what I don't remember, because going into this book, there were certain things I remembered really, really clearly, and those are actually things that happen in like the last 200 pages of the book, a certain plot line. And I just thought it was really funny that that was what stuck with me the most, especially there's this one duel that happens in this book. Hopefully that's not a spoiler. And I remembered that as being so pivotal, and it is an important moment, but it takes like a page. And for some reason, that was like, I had a huge buildup in my mind to that scene, which it was a really good scene. It's interesting seeing that those are the elements of the book that captured my attention that I can still remember 20 years later. But earlier in the book, there are sort of two main threads, and one of them has to do with Rand, and the other one is kind of following Egwene and Nynaeve. And I thought it was really funny because I think if you asked me when I was younger, I would have been more interested in Rand and in the boys as characters, but it's the only storyline that I actually remembered, like the only parts of the book I remembered are the ones that were with Egwene and with the Aes Sedai. And that was actually my favorite storyline reading the book now as well. I think Egwene was probably my favorite character so far, which really surprises me because I feel like when I was younger, that was a character I would have been primed to find kind of annoying. But I actually feel like I kind of like her the most out of a lot of characters in The Wheel of Time so far. A lot of people told me after I read the first book that book 1 is really an homage to Tolkien and that the series totally changes after that. And I did believe them. I talked already in that last video about how the Tolkien homage elements honestly didn't really bother me, and I didn't find them to be as strong or prominent as I had when I was younger, because I think the younger you are, the more you might notice like superficial similarities rather than differences of theme or plot or things like that. But I was actually blown away by how fast the pacing was in The Great Hunt. Like, everyone told me it's going to get faster, it won't be so slow. And I was like, yeah, sure, I'm sure. But I also know this is a really long series that's known for being slow at times. But seriously, the first 100 pages of this book were breakneck. And I just went from this, this slow meandering journey of book 1 to a sort of tightly plotted political first 100 pages of the book where, well, again, I don't want to give any spoilers, but Rand is stuck in a certain situation and you're finding a lot more about the different political things that are at play, things that are going on, and I found myself very invested and very excited by that first 100 pages of the book. And I would say even maybe the first couple 100 pages of the book, I really, really enjoyed the pacing. It felt fast, but in a good way. Like, I thought it was really interesting and really held my attention. It didn't didn't feel slow at any point. And overall, I feel like most of this book did feel a little more pointy than the first book, which sometimes was kind of meandering. But there were still times where it was just like everyone was on the road traveling somewhere, and I'm just wondering, is all of Wheel of Time just about characters traveling from point A to point B? Like, why can't things happen when they're in one place? To me, a lot of the most interesting things happened when they stopped somewhere for a while and there were politics and stuff like that, characters that were scheming, where they got to get involved in stuff instead of just, well, like in the first book, they spent the whole time basically running from, as someone put it in the comments, I think running from one side of the continent to the other, trying to get away from something. And then in this book, they chased back across the same continent trying to find something. So, I don't think people need to be always traveling. And we'll see. Maybe that won't continue to be a thing. But could more not happen when they were in one place? I did really enjoy all of the politics, especially the Aes Sedai. I'm looking forward to learning more about that. I still really enjoyed the world building in this book. I actually found there was less pure world building in this book, and that there was a lot of payoff from things that were set up or mentioned in book one. But one of the things I really love about the world that Robert Jordan has created is that you do get this sense of depth. There are all these things that are in the world that may or may not become important later on. I think they probably will be important later on. But things from history, past ages, the age of legends, where the characters don't really know what things do or what happened in history exactly or what things are for. There's a lot that they just don't know, things they kind of know about. So you do get the sense of like depth in the world building, which is one of my favorite elements of world building, is when an author manages to create something that feels real because of just these different layers to the world building and the fact that like not every character can just explain everything to you. I also definitely feel like the characters were better defined in this book. I started to get more of a sense of who some of them were. One of the areas where I feel like Robert Jordan really excels with characters, which surprised me, is I feel like he's really good at showing relationships between characters. And that sounds kind of funny because what he's not good at is showing characters getting into relationships. Like a lot of people have commented on this before. When people are in love, it's very much insta love, like, okay, we're in love now. But when characters have long established friendships or things like that, you really feel the depth of those relationships. The way the characters respond to each other feels pretty realistic to me. So that's something I liked. I think I mentioned this in my vlog that I filmed, but I really liked the relationship between Rand and Egwene. They don't get a lot of screen time together in this book. And again, I don't want to give spoilers, but just the history of their relationship and the way that they feel about each other, whether it's a friendship or a romantic relationship, it just really felt like two characters that have grown up together. I really felt it. I do feel like a lot of the characters in this series annoy me at times, but then with this book, two of the characters that I said were annoying me the most did really epic, amazing things at the end of the book that made me love them. So I'm just gonna need to be more patient, I think. I do still feel like Rand is not the most compelling protagonist, but he was fine. He had a little bit more personality in this book. I also feel like I did kind of enjoy the villains more in this book. There were a few villains that just had a little bit more of a face to them, which I wouldn't say they were complex, but I would say they were enjoyably evil, where in the first book, it was just kind of like, well, not Nameless, because he does have a name, but this the Dark One. I don't find the Dark One to be a very compelling villain. Like, when you have a nameless, faceless, threatening evil, the best thing for it to do is stay off screen and just menace you. Kind of like that's what Sauron does in Lord of the Rings, right? If Sauron is showing up in everyone's dreams every night and being like, I'm gonna get you, it's not that scary. It's kind of more like whack-a-mole annoying. It's like, how many times is this guy gonna show up and try to tempt you to the dark side, right? It's scary when it happens less often. So I don't know. I'm not really loving the evil in this world, but again, I'm willing to reserve judgment on that as well. I think the more of the Forsaken that we start to see, I think that is, that gives kind of a character and a face in a more interesting way to the evil, I think. Something I keep harping on is that I feel like it's not well enough explained why anyone would choose to become a dark friend and go over to the dark side. And I feel like we get a little bit more of that in this book, but I still need more. I am not seeing the payoff to selling your soul to evil in this world. It seems like a bad, sort of depressing thing to do. And I don't have a problem with books that set up conflicts between good and evil, but I want to understand the feelings of evil. I don't want it to just be evil in a black cloak for absolutely no reason because that's what evil is. That doesn't scare me. I think that's the biggest thing. Like, yeah, there is evil, and I think there's evil in our world too, but like a lot of the times evil is pretty human. So overall, I really enjoyed The Great Hunt. I think everybody that told me just keep going after the first book, well, obviously I'm planning to keep going. I have committed to reading the entire series this year, and I'm going to do that. But those people were right. The pace really did pick up. I really am getting a better feel for the series. I can't help but compare Wheel of Time so far to how I feel about the Stormlight Archive because it's one of my favorite series. And I feel like what Brandon Sanderson does a lot better, in my opinion, is creating satisfying arcs and satisfying plot and character arcs of different sizes so that in every book, you have a pretty large payoff, and then you have a lot of smaller payoffs. So even though there is this build towards this big, epic 10-book thing, you also get a lot of payoff as you go. Obviously, there are places where Stormlight feels slow, and some people think that The Way of Kings is kind of a slow book, which I don't really feel, but that's a matter of personal opinion. I can't tell somebody that something isn't slow. It's all about how you feel when you're reading it. But I really appreciate even more now what Brandon Sanderson has done with the first 4 books of the Stormlight Archive, but I feel like he's also really building on what Robert Jordan did. So this isn't really intended to criticize the Wheel of Time. It's just, I feel like I see, with Stormlight, I trust from the beginning, okay, we're going somewhere, I see the arcs, I see the progression, and here, I'm just kind of trusting I'm along for the ride, but I don't have as much confidence in it, if that makes sense. But I'm really looking forward to continuing with The Dragon Reborn. I'm looking forward to, I think I started The Dragon Reborn when I was younger, and that's as far as I got in the series. So soon I will be further into the Wheel of Time than I've ever been. So thank you guys for watching. I really enjoy getting all the comments from the Wheel of Time fans. I know that people really love this series, and it's meant so much to so many people. And I don't know if this is going to end up being one of my favorite series or not. Obviously, it's one of my best friend's favorite series, and that's why I'm reading it, other than, just general curiosity as a fantasy fan. But I really do feel like this series makes me want to keep reading because I've been in the fantasy community for long enough. I've been reading fantasy books for decades. I basically know what happens in this series. Of course, there's so much that happens in this series. I don't know all the little details and things like that, but I know sort of the major arcs and plot points, I think, just from being around and hearing people talk about it. So I'm not reading to find out what happens at this point. I basically know roughly what happens, but I still feel like when I read these books, I want to keep reading, and that's probably the most important thing. I think these books do capture like the love of epic fantasy and the sense of wonder and adventure and all the things that drew a lot of us into fantasy, even though sometimes it's slow and I'm sick of them being on the road all the time and all of that. Like, these are books that make me want to read before bed. These are books that make me want to keep experiencing the series. And I think that's really fun. So thanks for watching, guys. Let me know if you've been reading Wheel of Time this year, either as a reread or for the first time. Let me know your thoughts on The Great Hunt down in the comments. Let me know where you're at in the series, and I'm looking forward to discussing it with you guys.